Welcome to another episode of the Lords of Consciousness podcast. I am your host, Clint Culberson, and today is a wonderful day because the Lords of Consciousness is getting ready to embark on a weekend journey out to Joshua Tree, California. We got press passes to the Contact in the Desert convention out there. We're really looking forward to it. Richie Jones and I are heading out. And there's going to be some incredible people out there like Graham Hancock and Giorgio Tsoukalos and Brad Olson, who we had on the podcast recently, and just endless amounts of like amazing brains who have been exploring ancient civilizations, also the extraterrestrial question and all the evidences that have been piled up through the generations of extraterrestrial contact. And so we're really excited to go out there and kind of cover that event and talk to people because it's definitely part of the picture. And I'm part of the picture. The big picture is the money system. And today's guest, I'm really honored to have on. I've been able to have several conversations with him prior to this recording. But our guest tonight is Mr. Mads-Palsvig he's from Denmark. He's a former investment banker for banks like Barclays and Morgan-Stanley and Credit Suisse, basically some of the largest banks in the world. And I'm really excited to have him on tonight to give us a breakdown of what his experience was like and why he left it and now is coming out and speaking out. I mean, he's now a total activist in terms of speaking out against the money system, the global banking cartel that has strangled our species. And Mads, it's so good to have you. How are you, buddy?
Thanks a lot, Clint. I'm very well, thank you.
Well, your experience with these corporate banks is it's just so it lends such credibility to your story and to what you're telling everyone now, and that you're actively going out and sharing. I kind of wanted to know if you might be able to give us a little bit of a history of your resume and just share with us where you've come from, what it was like working in these banks, and then slowly kind of go into, I guess, your awakening within that.
Sure. I mean, well, it started out when I was young, and yesterday I had lunch with my father's childhood friend's daughter, and she's 50 like me, and she told me that when I was a kid, I mean, I was always saying I just want to be rich, make a lot of money. And she thought I was a really annoying kind of guy in those days. But I was very goal oriented and very right wing, and I did what it took. I took 2 university degrees, and I worked hard. And before I passed my last degree, which I studied in the evening, I said to my boss in a Danish bank that I was going to study, but I actually flew to London for a week and I applied for several jobs, and I got a job with Credit Suisse First Boston, trading European government bonds. And I did that for 5 years and had some semi-retirement, traveling with my wife and our 3 children. And then I came back to London, and I went to Hong Kong to work. And then I had my last job at Morgan-Stanley back in 2011. And what has been interesting is that I've always been kind of very interested in history and politics and how the economy works. My father was a psychologist, so he and all his friends were both left-wing, but also believing in utopia and creating a better world. So it was a normal dinner conversation, was how to create a world where everybody would have a great life. So it's always been in the back of my mind, and the reason I was so convinced that capitalism was a good thing was because I saw what communism did to people that had no democracy, no freedom of speech. They had killed so many people. At the time, I did not realize that the revolution in 1917 was instigated by bankers in Wall Street, financed by the Schiff family, and Trotsky was coming from Brooklyn with 20 other Bolshevists, and they financed the revolution in Russia. And just the first 4 years, they murdered 20 million people. So, which is a big pill to swallow for some of my friends and acquaintances with communist or left-leaning backgrounds, that actually Lenin was a lunatic. He had a brain damage. He was a psychopath, and he was a mass murderer, and was behind the killing of at least 20 million just in the first 4 years of his reign, where they simply went from house to house and tortured the family and until the father of the house would tell where their money was, and then when they got the money, they killed the family, and they transferred the money to United States. And Lenin and Trotsky had their cut. They ended up with about $75 million in Switzerland. So they were really banksters, really mass murdering banksters, and it has the same. Now I've had a chance to read a lot of history, and it has the same. They do the same thing. That's the thing with psychopaths, right? Once they get in a way of doing stuff that works, they just repeat the same thing. It was the same with the French Revolution. We have been told in the universities that it was the poor working class revolution. It was as far from a working class revolution you can possibly get. It was banksters. It was at that time it was in England, and 5,000 agents. They hired 5,000 agents to make the revolution. They had a gentleman called Shelburne in a castle in southern England with some of the most clever people of England at the time, writing all the speeches, translating them to French, and then hiring Robespierre and all the other bad boys making all these speeches. And they also bought up a lot of the food from France and shipped it out of the country. So they created an artificial small lack of food. But at the time, actually, France was by far the richest country in the world. All the noble families of Europe, all the royal families of Europe were speaking French together. They were so snobbish. It couldn't be French enough. I mean, they were buying French food, French clothes, French art, French everything, right? And what is interesting is that once they came in and they killed all the royal family and the aristocrats, then they started killing who they really wanted to kill, all the intellectuals, all the people that could kind of help build the culture of the French people to become a more humane society. They killed all of them. And just to make sure, the group of people they killed the most of were the priests. Mm-hmm. So that you destroyed this belonging. I mean, whether you are a Christian or an atheist or whatever you are, at least, you know, the family values and the Christian values of being a decent citizen and so on. They killed all those as well. And here comes my point. The first law they made was to allow charging interest. Mm-hmm. Because until the French Revolution, the reason France was so rich was that human beings were not allowed to pay interest. And that is a huge stumble block for any kind of growth in the society. It used to be one of the biggest sins you could do in all religions in the world. And some of the wealthy aristocratic families decided to change that, and they changed it gradually. It took them hundreds and hundreds of years to do that, and now we're totally brainwashed to think it's normal. But actually, we don't need banks. We could make a public bank or a national bank owned by the people that lends out at zero interest. If you want to buy a house, there's absolutely no reason you pay interest for that whatsoever. It could be a human right to have a place to live. And if you come, let's say you want to buy a house for $100,000 or a flat, and you come with $20,000 in down payment, how can your society lose money on lending you the $80,000? I mean, if you don't pay, you can take the house back, and you know the human being would have lost $20,000, right? Or you can just allow people to live there, and if they get unemployed, the person could call the national bank, say, hey, I'm unemployed. Is it okay? I don't pay my mortgage for a couple of months until I recover, and the national bank will say, yeah, of course. I mean, whether you own your house fully paid, whether when you are 51 or 52 years old, it doesn't really matter. Let's say you, for example, you paid 20% down, you paid on your house for 3 or 4 years, so you already own maybe somewhere between 30 and 40% of your house. Then how can the society lose by granting you that humane friendliness of allowing you to get back on your feet again, right? I mean, it's just so simple, but you can't do that in a society where you pay maybe 5% interest on your mortgage. If you do that, then in a few years' time, very soon the debt in the house might be bigger than the value of the house. So because we have this interest charging system, it's very cruel, and it's antisocial, and it's inhumane. And there's absolutely no reason why we have this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, companies can pay interest if they want, because that's basically just it's just a way of negotiating whether you want to have shares or you want to have a fixed interest. And that can be a bet between shareholders, right? So I don't care whether companies pay tax, but human beings should not be allowed to pay interest.
So, what you just described is something that really hits up against most people's programming. The idea of what are you talking about? Are you just talking about giving everything away for free and all this stuff? I'm sure even the past version of mods would have listened to the current version of mods and been like, what is he talking about? That's bullshit. That's not the way. There's no way that could work. How did you go then from, conservative mods to present day you, who's seeing the history of it, and then also just the immoral part of it, and then like you're saying, the solution to it, and a simple solution?
Well, I think that one thing we have to realize is that human beings are really not very good at big numbers. I mean, we've been for tens of thousands of years only been used to calculate maybe up to 100, maximum 200 animals. We never needed more than that. It was if we ever saw more than 200 animals, it was a big herd and enough food for forever. So we never really understood that. So if I say if I start saying 100,000 or 500,000, we start worrying. But if I say a billion or a trillion, I mean, most people have just something with a lot of numbers, right?
Yeah, true.
And if I may give you a very good example, I mean, basically, so what I do as a trader, calculating, what we do is we translate numbers into something we can understand. So when we have to make a split-second decision whether we want to buy or sell, when some news comes out in the market and we're trading government bonds, we have to translate, what will this new economic data, let's say there was an inflation data that showed that inflation went either up or down, it doesn't matter what it did, but we have to calculate really quick, what would that mean for the GDP of the society, for the long-term prosperity of the nation, and we have to think really quick. So you get used to recalculating all these numbers, and the best example I can give you is in the 90s. I'll give the conclusion first and I'll explain. In the 90s, $1 billion was a lot of money. In the double O's, $1 trillion was a lot of money. Let me give you a couple of examples. In 92, George Soros, his claim to fame was that he spent £2 billion to destroy the British pound, which actually meant that they didn't join the euro, they devalued. In the 1992, the British pound devalued by 20% or something like that. It cost only an investment of $2 billion. And the same thing was with long-term capital, the hedge fund that went belly up in 99, I think it was. That was like $1 or $2 billion. The Asian crisis, they managed to destroy the Thai baht and several of the other Asian currencies in 98. That was also just a bet of $1 billion or $2 billion, right? And then in 2008, the financial crisis, if you calculate the amount of money these banksters have taken out of our society, using the banks as vehicles to transfer wealth from ordinary citizens to the real beneficiaries of the banks, because it's not the bank who's making the money. The bank is only a tool to transfer money from ordinary citizens to the super rich. We're talking about trillions. We're probably talking about Well, if you take the country like Ireland, their national debt went from 15% of GDP to 115%. So it went up with 100% of GDP. So if you look at all the countries in the world, how much money this was, we're talking about, let's say a number, and it could be give or take, but probably something like $30 trillion. That's conservative. So that's $30,000. So before we could make a global impact in the society with a couple of billion, like 1, 2, 3 billion, and the amount of money they managed to steal was 10,000 times larger in '08. So an already huge number in the 90s when they were robbing and stealing and doing their global international bank sting, gangster thieving, robbing. For them, it was a couple of billion was a lot of money, even for the banksters. But they got greedy, and in '08, they robbed 10,000 times as much. And this is something we have to repeat many times, because there are so many zeros behind that people don't get it. Right. But if I say that it was a lot of money 25 years ago, but 7 years ago it was 10,000 times larger, then people can understand, I think, much better what we're talking about here. Because I think a lot of people just think, yeah, it was a lot of money in the 90s, a lot of people put money in the 08. No, in the 90s it was pocket change in comparison. It was nothing. So I think that all these criminal acts they did before were kind of test runs to their home run. And in '08 was their home run. They have stolen so much money that right now they are able to bribe every politician in the world. And I honestly do believe that they're doing that. I mean, in Denmark, we are quite arrogant. I mean, we have all these surveys saying that we're the most happy nation in the world, and we're very proud of being Danish, and all that. And we think that we are better people. We think that we could never be corrupt. But the Spanish people are corrupt, and the Greek are corrupt. All the Southern Europeans are corrupt. And that's because, I mean, a lot of these people have been caught transferring money to Switzerland, yeah? Mm-hmm. Now, since I came out in January, and I made my first speech in January, I was 50 years old. I mean, I did not want to be an activist. I just had to do it in the end. I just couldn't not do it anymore. But I was 50 when I started. Okay, so it's not something. This has not been my life dream to do this. I just have to do it. But since then I've had 3 whistleblowers contacting me who has inside information on how Danish politicians and leading people in the administration are transferring money offshore, and they have offshore accounts, and they were not, of course, included in the Panama leaks, because we are in Denmark a vassal of the United States. We do whatever you guys say. You want to bomb Libya, we'll ship the planes to you. You want to bomb Syria, we're there. You want to ship your weapons to the Middle East. We have a large shipping corporation that will sort that out for you. Whatever you do, you want to buy our best companies on the stock exchange, Goldman Sachs, please come and rape us any moment you want. And we just sold out Dong, which is a huge energy company, and a couple of months later they made 35% gain. Wow. So we're just being robbed, and it's like a gangster. I mean. The present government that has usurped the power in the United States are gangsters. I'm not saying the American people. No. The American people are lovely people. They're great people.
So are the Danish people.
Sorry, yeah. I mean,
so
we're
are the Libyans. People. So are the Iraqis. So, and it's funny because the countries that we tend, that we're in these global, geopolitical wars with are the countries that say, no, we don't want to play in your sandbox. No, we don't want the global banking cartel in our country. And when you look at a guy like Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, and you start realizing that, hey, man, the story that we were told about this guy wasn't true. I mean, it was a total propaganda machine that was saying that this guy was terrible and he was this awful guy. And what in reality is people loved him, and he's responsible for some of the greatest civil civil works, to benefit the lives of the people than of any leader in recent history. In terms of getting fresh water to the desert, to the places in his country that needed it, where people were ruling the country themselves. And yet, from a Western perspective, you had no idea because the media would only feed you some just bullshit propaganda. And you're right. I mean, most of the other countries that seemingly are our allies are basically just the ones that, they just agree to do what we say, Not we, but, the masters of the United States. And really the masters of the United States are just maybe they're just the top of command, but it goes further than that. They're not the top of the pyramid. It goes higher. In fact, they're probably living in Europe. So,
true. That's the last part is, I believe, true.
Yeah. Could you explain to people what fractional reserve lending is and what that means and exactly how it works? Because this is another way that they have taken that wealth that you're talking about from the people and put it into their coffers.
Yeah, I can do that, and I can do that in a trust me, I'm an investment banker kind of way, but and people will hopefully take my word for it. Yeah. But actually, the best thing is to do your own research. It's a huge thing, and there are so many people, much more able to explain it much better than I can. Right. For example, Michael Hodson and Ellen Hodson Brown and positivemoney.org in the United Kingdom. There are plenty of YouTube videos so I can explain it better, but let me do it as simple as I can. Basically, the story is that most of us, including myself a year ago, believe is that the central bank produced the money, and obviously everybody believes that the central bank is national bank and owned by the people and the government you live in, the country you live in, which is not the case. It's privately owned. Federal Reserve of the United States is privately owned. Denmark's National Bank is not Denmark's. It's privately owned as well, and it's the same all over. But we all believe that they are government owned and that they produce the money, and then old ladies save the money, deposit it in the bank, and then the bank is so nice and big and works as an intermediary and lend that money out. And that is as far from the truth you can possibly get. And even our educational system is part of this fraud, trying to explaining the banking system roughly that way, but it's not true at all. Only the notes and the coins are made in the central bank, but the 95% of the money is digital money, and that is created when you and I, for example, when we go down to get a loan. Let's say I want to borrow $10,000. I write a piece of paper. Hey, my name is Mads. I owe whoever has this piece of paper $10,000. I'm creating money that way. That is money. And the bank then takes that piece of paper and puts it on their asset side, on their balance sheet. And then they go into my bank account or make a new bank account and puts in a 1 and 4 zeros after. And that way they create out of the blue, out of the thin air, $10,000. They might as well gone down the basement and committed counterfeiting and photocopied $100 notes and handed it to me physically as notes. There's no difference, because whether they give me the notes right there or whether they put it digitally and then I go to a cash machine and take it out, it really is no difference at all. That is how money is created. And fractional reserve bank.
How do they justify it? Like what, when if you were to confront the head of Goldman Sachs, how would he justify that, saying that that's somehow good business, or do they just not even talk about it at all?
No, they don't talk about it at all. But the justification is that as long as I keep working and I'm able to pay interest and start paying back that $10,000, then the system works. But the problem with this system is that that only the amount you borrow has been created. You have to pay it back plus interest, but the interest has not been created. So this is like like this musical chair phenomenon. There you have 5 chairs, but you're 6 people, and when the music stops, you sit down, and there's one guy left over, and he's going bust, right? He's going bankrupt. So the only way I can pay back $10,000 plus interest would be if someone else would borrow money and create that money into existence, which I then can make and pay back the interest. So this is why the debt always keep going up in the entire world.
Yeah.
It's basically, otherwise you can't pay back your loan plus interest. So in a society where people didn't have to pay interest, you wouldn't have that problem. And then, of course, the national bank should create the money, and they can create, just like the national bank can create physical money in the form of and shape of coins and notes. The national bank should do like John F. Kennedy did for a few months before they killed him, these banksters, in 1963, after Executive Order 11,110, where he issued American government money, real money, just like Abraham Lincoln did in order to win the Civil War back in the 1860s.
Yeah, another president who ended up dead. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing that anyone who has stood up against this Federal Reserve banking system in the United States, or I'm sure it's happened in Europe too, with all of the national banks, even though they're all privatized, you stand up against it and you tend to lose your neck, and it's been something that's occurred over and over. But I think. And, even you who's come out now and is talking about this, I think we've reached the stage now where we don't have to necessarily fear for our lives, especially if enough of us stand up against it. They can't kill us all. I mean, there's not even enough bullets. They don't even have the manpower to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, we outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. So you can only imagine, geez, if even 1,000 of us per one of them stands up, we take this over and we change this completely, and it's done tomorrow. And it's fascinating to see this happening though. And how do you think though? You explained how. They had their big payday in 2008. It went up. The Ponzi scheme went up 1,000-fold. I mean, exponential insanity. Do you think it's been intentional? I mean, because this system is not sustainable forever. Even their Ponzi scheme is not sustainable forever. I mean, right now, if the Federal Reserve were to raise the interest rate just to 10%, our interest payment alone in the United States on $18 trillion would be almost $2 trillion, which is basically what we bring in as a national government anyway. So literally every penny would just be going to an interest payment. And this is their Ponzi scheme. So I guess my question again is, do you think it was intentional? I mean, they seem pretty calculated as to what they're doing. And if it is intentional, what is the end game? Because they're going to crash their own party, right?
Oh, I mean, it is 100% intentional. 100%. I mean, 1913 was the biggest privatization ever made when the Federal Reserve was privatized in 1913. And that was also the year when they introduced income tax. And the way they do it is, of course, what we call the salami method, right? You start and you start chopping it all down. So they said it was income tax was something like 0.1% for everybody making $1 million or more. I.e., everybody said, yeah, what? It's only 0.1, and it's only for people making an obscene amount of money. So everybody accepted that. But once they accepted that, they were hooked. Bam! The income tax was allowed. Apparently, it's actually illegal because it has only been ratified by 2/3 of the states in the United States. So actually, the income tax is illegal in the United States, the way I understood it. But everybody's paying it, I guess it's working for them. But the income tax has been created to be able to charge interest on the people to a large scale. Yeah.
It's it's funny because again it is unconstitutional. I mean, it goes against our primary law, and yet it just happens, and literally nobody does anything. Nobody cares. Well, first off, the people aren't smart enough to even know it's illegal for the most part. It's a shame that only such a small few people even understand that it's illegal. We've just literally accepted it as normal, like you said. So, can you? I've heard you in other interviews kind of explain how the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank work, and it's a fascinating story in terms of, you know, they're portrayed to be this bank that comes and helps poor countries, you know, get on their feet. And what's really happening? Talk about gangsters, the ultimate gangsters.
Talk about gangsters. I mean, just again, starting with the conclusion. If you go into a country that is on its knees and really, really struggling and asking for help, and here comes this great white knight and promising to help, but charging 7, 8, 9, 10% interest, is it then really a white knight? Isn't it a black knight?
Yeah.
Is it really helping you when you're on your knees? And then are they lending you your money in your own currency, or are they lending you the money in their own currency? And they're doing the last, of course. So that means that once this poor country is borrowing in another currency than their own, they cannot inflate their way out of the debt. They have no chance. They are hooked. Because all you then need to do is to send in some economic hitman like the gentleman John Perkins, he was, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to just go in, corrupt a few politicians, make them build some huge public projects they probably don't need, like motorways for the rich and new airports left, right, and center, maybe have an Olympic game or whatever, so that they spend a lot of billions, and all of a sudden the tax revenue doesn't really cover it. So IMF says you have to hike taxes and cut public expending in the public sector. And what happens then is the economy goes into a tailspin in a recession, and they, of course, can't get the tax base. They don't get any tax revenue. They can't pay off that debt. And then the share price of that country goes down, which makes it cheaper for foreigners to come in and buy their companies. And the real estate market collapses, and everybody is poorer. And now the international banksters are in a really good position to go in and demand what they really wanted to begin with, which is all their national treasures, national wealth, their mining, their mining rights, maybe have a military base there for free, having the right to. I mean, and the way they pollute these multinational corporations is insane. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have in the United States alone, I believe I've read, you have 160,000 mines that corporations have used and emptied your country for national resources and made a lot of profits on. And then when the bill comes to clean up the mess from the pollution involved with the mining, all of a sudden there's no money left in the company, and the bill goes to the taxpayers. God. And that's 160,000 mines in the United States, their own country, where the owners of these corporations, they live with their wives and children and whatever, their family. How do you think these multinational corporations, they act in Southern America, in the Amazon, for example, next to an Indian tribe they have no relation to? It is unbelievable the amount of pollution these corporations are creating, and it seems that there are no repercussions. There's no way you can go in and sue these, because they say, well, it's owned by a tiny company that it has no money left. Well, I don't understand why if let's say you and I we go out and we buy a television set or a bike that has been stolen, then when let's say the police finds out, they just come and collect the television set and the bike and gives it back to the legal owner. you see, so when human beings are doing something illegal, the tax system or the justice system can easily find out what is right and what is wrong. But how come when you have a corporation and that makes billions of dollars in mining revenues over maybe 20, 30 years, and they have not put any money aside for cleaning up after their mess, how come that we can't figure that out to go in and look at who were the owners the last 20 years, who benefited from this mining, and then send them the bill? What's the difference? Why not?
Yeah, and it's these corporations tend to be these faceless entities, that are so hard to trace who's even at the top, and because of the way that they structure they're legally structured. They can't ever even be responsible. There's no person that can be responsible. And now even with these new trade agreements that are happening, making it harder to even hold these corporations liable. And not only that, now these corporations can turn around and sue the government much easier. I mean, it's like the Ponzi scheme gets more fascinating it's almost as if they think we're idiots, and maybe we are idiots. They just realize they can just get away with it. And it's really fascinating because there's so much evidence that's just stacked up, and that's what you're doing. And you've like you've said, you've been over the last couple months, so you've just been in total download mode, and you're researching and getting more information. And it's probably the nightmare is probably worse than you ever even realized. Would you say so?
Yeah, no, it is true. I mean, whenever you look under a new stone, you find another dead body, so to speak. I mean, It's horrible, and I think that is actually the plan. I mean, if you could imagine, if it was only the monetary system that was a scam, we could deal with it. If it was only people making money out of wars, we could deal with it. If it was only the pharmaceutical corporations producing medicine that keeps us in disease and sickness in perpetuity, we could deal with it. I mean, it's the educational system that is indoctrinating us and telling us lies. Once you start studying, they are not speaking the truth to children and young people in the universities. No matter where you go, it's just horrible, and that just is so overwhelming for people, and very few people can look at the whole thing from a bird's eye perspective. But that's probably what we need to do now. We need to realize that it's everywhere, and we need to come together and accept that we need a total reboot of the system. And I think what we have to do now is we have to realize that it's 5 minutes to 12, as we say in Denmark. This is human beings against the machine. We are talking about the human beings fight for survival, and I'm serious. When you have people, murdering bastards, who have, for example, since 1945, NATO have killed, in wars they have started, 25 million people. When you have NATO, and we're part of NATO, and when they have killed 3 million Muslims since 2001, when they are willing to use uranium-depleted bullets in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, when they are willing to do that, then when the same owners of this military industrial complex and the oil companies and the banks and the central banks, when the same owners who owns this, when they say that they want population control, when they say that they want us only to be 1 billion, I believe they mean it. That is really scary. Really, really scary. And when the Prince of England comes out saying that he wished he would be reincarnated as a virus that would kill 6 billion people, these things are really scary when you see them acting as psychopaths and saying out loud that they are psychopaths, and then you have to take them literally, and that is very difficult for a lot of people. And now, with the advancement in the technological area, in robots and so on, we are, as they call, we are useless eaters. They don't need us anymore. Before, 50 years ago, they needed us in the mines, they needed us in farming, but now you have robots to do all the job. So they don't need us anymore.
Yeah, and especially when you look at how many people are dependent on, a government check to even to live. They're aware of that, and I think they probably give it to us because they don't, just let's keep them happy, keep them fed for now. We don't want them revolting, so let's give them their food stamps or give them their welfare check, and it's definitely there's so much evidence showing towards what you're saying in terms of their desires to have a reduction in population. I mean, look at the food system that they've created that's literally killing us. Obesity is widespread, not just in America anymore, even in Europe. People are getting fat over there too, it used to just be an American thing. And, but at the same time, we are seeing more and more people wake up to this, and more people who are stepping out, just like you, risking your neck. You just said you have insider information about, politicians in Denmark who are totally corrupt, and which is totally unshocking. As you're stepping out as an activist, Mads, what is your plan? What is your end goal? And then also how explaining to anyone listening, like how can people activate themselves, and what can they do in terms of helping take this system down and getting it to where we can have the reset? Because they're not interested in letting us reset it. But again, if we take advantage of our greatest gift as the slaves, is that we outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1, 1,000,000 to 1. But how do we do it? How do you, I know that's your goal is to activate people, but how, what is your plan?
Well, there are some good news. I mean, the good news is that in order for us to believe their lies, such as the lie that there's not enough food, that has to be repeated every day. They have to repeat it every day in the newspaper and on the television and so on. But once you realize what the truth is, you only need to know it once, and then you can spot it. And it's a little bit like if you are underwater, you are in a swimming pool, and you are listening to a conversation next to the swimming pool. You hear like blah, 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 blah. You can maybe pick out a word or two, right? Mm-hmm. But once you come up above you can hear everything. So I know it's tough to realize what made me so angry that I decided to get out the 26th of January and make a speech in front of 1,000 people. We sent out invitations to 1,200 journalists who all stayed away. Nothing to see here. Only the Dane who've met more central bankers than any other Dane in history. Nothing to see here. Only a Dane who want to expose the 4 different frauds of how banks are being used as tools to transfer money from the taxpayer to the super rich. And only just after a financial crisis in 2008 that nearly ended the world. So nothing to see here. So out of 1,200 journalists, nobody bothered to attend, right? Yeah. And it has been total silence since. But I think once you come out, the good news is that once you know it, there's no turning back. There's no traffic the other way. The traffic is only this way. I mean, once you know the truth, you're not going to go back believing their lies ever again. And what made me stand up was the two things. It was the way they treated Greece, and it was Gaddafi's man-made river. When Obama is talking about a mistake, it's not a mistake when you fly airplanes into a big country like Libya and bomb the entire irrigation system and the man-made river he had made, where he was sending for free water to the 2 poor countries south of Libya. He was basically, watering, irrigating the Sahara Desert single-handedly. Yeah. I mean, he was an amazing man. He may have done some horrible things. I don't know. That's what we're being told. I don't believe them. But even let's say they are right for once in their life, you can't take it away from him that he created this man-made river and that Obama and his generals bombed it. And I'm sure they bombed it not only to steal the 143 tons of gold that he had, but also to keep people believing the lie that there's not enough food. I mean, come on, in Africa, You can harvest 3 times a year. In Denmark, we can harvest once a year. In Africa, there are a lot less people per square kilometer than we have in Denmark. They have vast resources of natural wealth. I mean, Africa should be, by all standards, should be richer than we are. You know? So that was dangerous for them. If Gaddafi was setting an example there, they needed to stop that because they want us to believe in the scarcity. So we can have these wars, and you have friends of mine or football people I play football with saying, well, it's always been like that, and we're doing okay in Denmark. So and what they mean is there's not enough food. We've been told all the time there's not enough food. So it's better that we survive than they survive. That's the way they think. It's a little bit of a like two tiny chicken in a little tiny cage. The strongest will survive. But if you have chicken in open space, they start looking after each other. I heard stories about a chicken that couldn't walk anymore, and the other chicken were picking up little pieces of corn and putting it in front of this. So even chicken can be nice to each other if they are allowed enough space. And we are being lied to. The world is so wealthy, so wealthy. So what made me stand up was that if these people can destroy a man-made river with uranium, they can do anything, anything at all. And then in terms of Greece, you had a low-paid Greek worker was making €1,000 in 2008. That was the minimum wage, pretty much, €1,000. Now it's 150. So that means that in Europe, we pretend to be European, we pretend to look after each other, and we just accepted one country took an 85% pay cut. That is outrageous, and I will not have that. That is unacceptable in any way, shape, or form. It's inhumane and it's disgusting. So that's my motivation.
Honestly, thank you for taking a stand. We need more and more to be doing the same thing. And again, if we do, the more people that do stand up, the quicker that we can change this, the quicker that we can make it a better tomorrow for our children. Now, with that said, sometimes I think that maybe people won't wake up until it's painful enough for them. Take a country like Denmark. It's when we are addicted to modern convenience and to these nice lifestyles that we have in the Western world, despite the fact that we have to, at least especially in the United States, work insane hours to have these kind of conveniences. Do you foresee a collapse to this system in the short term? And if I hate to have you be the crystal ball man, but I think a lot of people are speculating and talking about it. How soon do you see it happening? And if it happens, what are the implications of the U.S. dollar collapsing? And these already the BRICS countries are setting up banks of their own to get out of the dollar. Tell me what you think.
Well, what I think is that very often the opposite happens of what you think. I mean, in 07, 08, you had all the newspapers writing how this was different this time, and we were going to be rich forever. And then the opposite happened. We had a collapse. I mean, and now everybody is worried about this collapse. But you have to think about if you and I were these criminal banksters, and we just robbed 30,000 more than a good highway robbery in the 90s, right? Then you and I would be concerned about one thing. Think as a criminal, right? We'll be concerned only about getting away with it, right?
Yeah.
That would be our main concern. And if we have to start a war somewhere, blow up a Twin Tower and a Tower 7, or if we have to, whatever we have to do, we would do it together, because it's so much money. It's at least $30 trillion, $30,000 billion at least they've stolen, right? Wow. So you and I would probably try to get away with that, right? And if we create an economic crisis all over the world, then there will be more people like you and me waking up and going out and doing a reset. I mean, come on, what's the big deal? I mean, when the banksters, they robbed everybody in Russia in 1917, they repeated that in 1991, 92, 93. Mm-hmm. My wife is Russian. We married in early 1990, and her parents had saved enough money to buy a house for cash, and overnight they lost everything. So when these banksters, and this was American banksters coming in, Russia just kind of they stopped the Warsaw Pact. They had a clear-cut deal with America that NATO would not move eastwards, and it was totally dishonored, as you can see. But these are criminals. This is NATO is a mass murdering, war criminal institution. So of course they didn't honor their word. You cannot trust a criminal. So they not only came in and moved NATO eastwards, but they also came in and changed the constitution so that the Russian central bank is controlled by the West, and they are not allowed to buy their own bonds. They have to invest in US dollars only. So can you think about one of the biggest countries in the world is not allowed to buy bonds in their own currency? So this is a way that they can steal between $30 and $60 billion a year. And at the same time, they came out and devalued their currency. They just took all the money in the banks, just like they did in Cyprus a few years back. They took all the money. They made what's called a bail-in. They took all the money over 100,000 euro. Anybody more than 100,000 euro, bang, they took it. And so they're not afraid of stealing. And I think that if they created a world crisis, then even the corrupt politicians, fearing for their lives, might come together and say, okay, let's do a reset. Let's just call off all the debt. And then all this money, this paper money, this money out of thin air, which is basically just a lot of zeros after a number in virtual banks, could just disappear, just the way that they robbed the Russian nation. Think about Russian nation in 1990, one of the richest countries in the world on natural resources. They owned all their flats and all their houses without a mortgage. How did you manage to convince the Russians that they were poor? That is one of the biggest scams in history. How you could do that? You send in a lot of well-spoken Americans in suits, some banksters coming in telling lies about economic problems, this, that, and the other. Russia was so wealthy. It was a net creditor. A lot of countries owed them money. They had, as I said before, they had all their houses and all their factories and all their flats. The government owned it without a mortgage. And they believed the banksters because I don't know why they did it. And they were suffering. The Russian population went down with 25 million people from 1990 to 2001 until Putin took over and started to turn this around. First thing he did was get rid of the 10 biggest oligarchs, the biggest criminals, thieves, and thugs. He got rid of them, and he's trying to now change the Russian central bank so it becomes a Russian central bank and not a foreign-owned central bank. But it's difficult because a lot of people in the Duma, the Russian parliament, is still on the paycheck from the West. And I think he needs 2/3 of them to kind of make a constitutional change or something like that. So,
do you believe that you hear, of course, on Western media that there's riots in the streets against Putin? I mean, do you think that's even a real thing?
Oh, come on, I was there for months. Come on. No, there are some intellectuals who are against Putin. And most of that is basically kind of people who would be against anything, all right? Mm-hmm. I was there for months. I lived with my mother-in-law. I was studying Russian in all of April at the Moscow University. And the Russian people are really, really hardworking, honest, noble people, well-behaved, well-mannered. There's no shouting in the street. There's no riots at all. They're just doing that.
Do they like Putin overall?
Yeah, I mean, he's like an 85% approval rating. I mean, come on. What about Obama? He can't move without 10,000 bodyguards, right? He's afraid of getting shot.
As he should. Criminals.
Well, I don't know. I'm against the death penalty for everybody at all.
Well, me too. But I'm just saying he should be worried because the people are starting to wake up and get angry, man. And some people don't know what to do with that anger except use violence. And I think part of what you're about in terms of changing the system is to have it be a non-violent, peaceful revolution. It's the only way to do it, because I think if we inflict violence upon them, it just gives them all the justification to hammer down on us, and they own all the weapons, so it's much easier for them to justify that, and easily for them to declare martial law. They're itching to do something like that. So I hope that everyone out there, as we try to turn the tide on this, that we always remember that nonviolence works the best. I think Gandhi showed that. I mean, it's definitely been proven to succeed. We got 5 more minutes, and I wanted to see if you could tell us, paint a picture of, you've kind of alluded to it already, but paint a picture of once we're able to get this, let's say tomorrow we made you the master and commander of global economics. How can we make it so that it benefits everyone? How can paint the utopian picture? What does it look like?
Utopian picture. We not only talk about audit the Fed. We realize that the Fed is a privately owned central bank that is not even telling us how much money it's making. It's not being audited. It's printing money out of thin air. It's funding wars left, right, and center. It's benefiting the super rich. We should not audit the Fed. It should be nationalized. You should have a public bank. Read about Ellen Hudson Brown, what she's suggesting. So you should nationalize the money creation and start paying every U.S. citizen somewhere between $200 and $400 a month, including children. I mean, I calculated in Denmark. If we do that in Denmark, it's $400 a month. So you can easily pay at least $200, maybe $300 a month. That's number one. And then number two, human beings should not be allowed to pay interest. End of story. And then number three, corporations should contribute to the society that they are abusing and making money in. So you should have a turnover tax on digital transactions. So that way the multinational corporations would start paying tax for the first time in history, because they don't. They have transfer pricing, and they have corporations all over the world, so they make sure that they have all their profits in a zero tax haven. So these are the first things I would do. Then you could pretty much abolish the income tax pretty soon, I'm sure. And then that way you would take the money, and if you have a zero interest, you would the wealth would have to come out and work for the society, because they couldn't just lie down and charge 5, 7, 8% interest and not be working, right?
So where do you go from here? Where what are your next steps personally?
Well, I still want to keep on studying, and I'm creating a lot of networks with people. I believe, like you and I, we both study, and if we study alone, it takes a lot of time. But if we are working with people with some of with overlapping interest, but with some different interest, then I am in a group of friends, and they might take my word when it comes to taxation and interest rates and those kind of stuff, and then I take their word when it comes to all other subjects, and then that way we can very, very much quicker learn what we should have been taught in the 17 years we wasted in the public school system.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. Amen.
God.
Amen. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think part of this entire media site that we've created with lordsofconsciousness.com was based on a small Facebook group that we had of just people, like-minded souls coming together who just wanted to have a space that they could, share themselves with. But then in so doing, we realized that everyone kind of came with their own little specializations, And so if a guy like you who's, look at your vast experience, decades of experience within the financial realm, you can save me a lot of time by just, downloading your information to me, and the expertise that I have, come share it with you. And in so doing, we can save ourselves a lot of time. We can educate ourselves very rapidly, and again, create this shift in a much quicker way. I mean, we can also collaborate together. I mean, for what I know, for the plans that you have, you're gonna have to require people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and as we combine them together, we really can we'll be an unstoppable force, if you ask me. And we've talked off air, but if there's anything that we can do for you to help you, I mean, I'd love to have you come on more often and just share with us, especially with current events that are going on. The key to me is being able to see when there's something happening in the news, and then realizing that news is completely corrupted, then being able to see through it. And someone like you, especially with your background, can easily see through that kind of stuff, especially when you get what the game is. And especially as we're going to probably have some false flag events that are going to be headed our way. They're going to try to get us in some World War III scenario. You can see it heating up right now with China and Russia against the United States. And, look at the propaganda that's happening against Putin. And yet Putin is the one that's trying to, unveil the lies that the United States has been telling the world. And that the United States has really been this imperialistic, really a continuation of the Fourth Reich, the Third Reich, now into the Fourth Reich. The Nazis never really even surrendered, and their influence is seen right here in the United States, in Western Europe, and all over really. And it's really important for us to call it out, so that way we don't get. Everyone in this world doesn't just react like we did after 9/11, and all of a sudden we're in some country that had nothing to do with it, and 15 years later, 2 million people are dead. 2 million people dead because of the propaganda that's been put over us. And people like you, I'm so appreciative that you're stepping out. Especially, there's so many of your coworkers from your past that are scared. They're scared to lose the status that they have. They're scared to upend their lives. They're scared to, like you've said, you've taken quite a pay cut, by jumping out of that world. But nature rewards courage. I do believe that. And I'm really grateful for this friendship that we have, and for what we're all doing together. And like you said, finding the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. We'll do it. We'll do it. We'll win this one, I'm sure.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm right there with you. We'll wrap it up there, but thank you, seriously, thank you, Mads, for coming on. And again, we would love to have you on again to share more of your knowledge, and anything we can do for you, just please reach out.
Thanks a lot, Clint. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to be on your show. I wish you all the best and great success with your show. I'm sure it's gonna be fantastic.
Oh yeah, it is. Well, you were the guest, so of course it was.
Well, going forward with your loss of consciousness side, I mean.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. All right, my friend. Thank you. And for those who enjoyed this show, please find us on YouTube, find us on Facebook, subscribe. This isn't about becoming rich and famous. This is about a movement, and all of alternative media needs to support each other, because, Mads, as he said, he put out his request for a bunch of people for what did you say? How many journalists to come see, and none of them came?
1,200.
1,200.
And 179 members of parliament.
Yep. Nobody, huh?
No.
So alternative media is quite important, and it's the only way that we're going to be able to really change this. We got to create our own media, and hopefully we can support it, and share this, educate people, because this kind of stuff can change people's lives. Someone's going to listen to this interview, and it will change their paradigm in such a way that literally will change their lives. They'll probably make steps in their lives to create more happiness in their lives, more connection with their family and friends because of it. No longer being addicted to money, conveniences, things like that, and then we can really reign in heaven on earth, because we can. As Mads said, this world is full of abundance, not scarcity. That's bullshit. This is the most abundant planet you can imagine, and everyone could be living in happiness and at least comfort, and with fresh, clean water and good foods, and not have to have parents who are both working and their kids being raised by a state. We can create this. And anyway, I'll end my rant. Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Totally agree with you.
Yep.
See you soon.